chat is for you guys to chat amongst yourselves, but if you have questions, you're going to want to put that in the Q&A. Also, today is more of a watch and learn. We go over the card and show the dailies workflow. It's not required to like have resolve open, but you can if you want to jump around the pages. See a few more people coming in here. Let a few more people join, and then we'll get started in about, I'll give it another minute or two. Just a reminder, the chat is for everyone to converse in, and then if you have questions, you're going to put that in the Q&A. We have a few more people joining, and we'll get started. Okay, I think we're ready to get started. My name is Mike Smolin. I'm the color pipeline and workflow manager here at Blackmagic Design. We have today Ramon Huggins and Daria Fasoon. They'll be monitoring the chat and or monitoring the Q&A and answering your questions as we go along. Today is kind of a watch and learn. It's the cart demo onset dailies workflow. Before I go over the agenda, if you have any questions regarding what you're about to see, or if we don't answer your questions in the Q&A, or because we run out of time, which we shouldn't, but if we don't get to your questions, you can always ping us at workflow@blackmagicdesign.com. That hits the workflow team here at Blackmagic Design, and that'll be myself, Ramon, Jim, Heather, Matt, and we can answer your questions regarding, your resolve questions, issues, end-to-end workflow. Really, the cart is one part of the entire end-to-end workflow. We have used this on multiple Disney Plus features, some indie films. It's being employed on a bunch of other features coming up, feature docs. It's really meant to be part of the piece of, from set all the way to finishing and resolve. Of course, you can use the cart agnostically. It doesn't matter what cameras you are using, or if you're not finishing in resolve, although you don't get all the benefits unless you're using the entire workflow end to end. So we'll talk about what the role of the digital asset manager is. We're going to go over the anatomy of the cart, the signal flow, and so on. We're going to go on, we're going to do an overview of the onset workflow, talk about media management, talk about using the clone tool and resolve, and copying your media to local drives. We're going to talk about creating LTOs and secondary drives. We're going to do some syncing on the cart. We'll use the auto sync feature and show how to adjust sync. Obviously we'll talk about some color correction because that's involved in dailies. We'll talk about the open API and creating some scripts to utilize some metadata on set, which is what we do on most of these features. We'll talk about setting up your presets, some data burn-ins, your render presets. And finally, we'll talk about rendering and uploading your dailies using either Pix, which is popular, or using Frame.io, or using some Frame.io integration and Resolve as another layer of collaboration. So it's going to be exciting. So let's get started and let's talk about what the role of the digital asset manager is. When we're on set and we're doing the role of the digital asset manager, we're basically acting as the host facility. We are we're not doing just data wrangling and loading LUTs. We're actually doing the dailies on set. Usually, depending on depending on the workflow of the show, sometimes you can do a break midday, a break end of day. We try to keep the dailies flow going because what's different between this workflow and a traditional dailies onset dailies pipeline is we're delivering dailies, all the dailies by the end of day. And so that includes data management, the color correction, and whatever renders that need to be done. So usually about a half hour to 45 minutes after wrap, the dailies for that day is done and have already been delivered to editorial. And in depending on the show, most cases have been loaded to the daily, however the executives are gonna be watching dailies. So whether it's Pix or whether it's Frame.io, that operation is already happening. So really everybody is a lot closer to the action, or a lot closer to what's going on camera. You're never more, the editors are never more than like 6 hours behind of what's happening in production, and the executives are usually not more than about 12 hours, depending on where you are in the world. If you're shooting on the East Coast, like in Atlanta, they're watching the first half of the day's dailies at their lunchtime here in Los Angeles, and then they're seeing the second half when they come in at like 9 in the morning. So they're less than 24 hours behind of what's going on, which is really great. That's a way for them to cut down on costs of production, because there's less turnaround time, less reshoots, less inserts, pickup days. So I think on the first job we did this on, we had maybe 4 hours of pickups for the whole feature, and we had like one reshoot day. So it really pays off to do this workflow. But when you're combining a bunch of things that the post facility would do, like processing dailies and prepping a drive and sending it to editorial, that's all happening from set. Your uploads are most likely happening from set, unless you're really remote. On the last job, we were in a foreign country, and we didn't always have an internet connection, so we employed different resources to do our uploads for us. So what you're looking at here is the anatomy of the cart. This is the cart broken down. So basically what you, oh, I should ask if there's any questions that we haven't gotten to before I move on here. Anything?
Oh, we're good right now, right, Darian?
Yeah, we're good so far. We've only just had the one question asking you if you're going to be going over creating reports.
Yes, I can talk about reports when we get to that part.
No, other than that, we're all eager to learn.
Okay, so this is the anatomy of the cart broken down. So basically what happens here is you have your cameras. These are some Blackmagic cameras. The cameras are usually sending a wireless signal to the cart. So you'll probably have some kind of wireless antenna like a Teradek in between the cart signal, the camera and the cart. And then the audio mixer is going to plug into these audio distribution, and that's going to feed the Teranex Mini embedders. So that what that's going to do is it's going to embed your picture and sound, and then we're going to feed those to the hyperdecks that are on the cart. So the hyperdecks are really great because they record, they can read SDI record flag information. So if you have Teradeks that are Bolt XL series Teradeks, they can send the record flag, send and receive record flag information. So when they go into record, the decks go into record. And that's super helpful because you don't want to be pushing all the decks into record every single time they're doing a take. Those hyperdecks are on the cart for on the day playback. If they want to see something immediately with the Dailies color correction on it, they can look at that right away, right from those hyperdecks. Those hyperdecks are wiped every single day. So they take SD cards, or you can record to like one of our multi-docs, and you basically wipe that information every single day because as you'll see later on, that information is in the dailies. So you'll play back from Resolve if they want to see it from a different day. So the hyperdeck feeds the audio mixer, the audio monitor, and you have some scopes on the cart, and then the decks also feed your ATEM control switcher. Switcher is for calling up different video feeds to Video Village, and what you're monitoring on the cart. The cart itself has anywhere from 32 to 64 SDI outputs, depending on like what kind of camera configuration you're using. This is only a 3 camera, but the feature I just came off of was a 6 camera configuration, and the very first one we did was a 9 camera configuration. So you just it's expandable, so you can add decks, take away decks, take away distribution, add distribution. But the switcher can handle all of it. You can have up to 10 input and outputs, and then you have some auxiliary outputs, think up to 3, and then you have program preview and a multi-view that all come out of the switcher. So a lot of times on my card, I'll have like what the main camera is on one of my monitors, and on the second monitor I'll be viewing the multi-view, so I can see what cameras are coming up next. You can see here we also have an Ultra Studio in the signal path. That's actually taking a feed, one of the SDI distribution feeds, and feeding the signal that's coming into it into the Ultra Studio, so that you can do Resolve Live. So Resolve has a function where you can feed it a live signal, and you can grade and freeze the image and take stills and save those color corrections and apply them later. So it's really helpful if you're doing maybe some HDR on set. You have the ability to view HDR on set. We did this on the first feature we were on. We actually did have a Sony X300 on set, so we could feed it the color correction, and we could monitor like what it would be color corrected in HDR, so that the cinematographer could have that in mind when he was doing his lighting.
I say, Mike, I've got a couple of requests here for presentation. Could you raise your volume on your mic if that's possible? Just because you're coming in a little bit low.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, much better.
Okay.
So yeah, any more that you can raise, that would be great. And also, would you be able to full screen your presentation? Because we can see like the 3 thumbnails, for the presenters. And that's kind of downscaling your slide a bit, so that text is a little harder to see.
Full screen. Interesting. Let me see if I can do that. Let me see my Zoom settings here. Doesn't seem like I can go any bigger than what I have right now. You're seeing what
the 3 presenter thumbnails, even though none of us have video running. Do you have the option to make your window floating? I think that when you share your screen, that's an option.
Let's see. Let me check my Zoom settings.
In the meantime, will the slideshow be available? You've already mentioned that we don't have recordings of these workshops available, but is there any documentation people will be able to access?
Yeah, we have documentation that we can share if they ping us at workflow. We're happy to share the documentation, the workflow documents, and also we have a white paper on this. So does that change it? Maximize my window.
No, I'm afraid it still looks the same, but I guess we could just move on.
Sorry about that. Okay, so that was the signal flow, and then obviously you have your monitors, and then you can feed that distribution to any number of monitors on set. You can have a certain amount of monitors on your cart or on anyone else's cart, and you have up to 32 of those outputs. This is the anatomy of the cart. Basically, what you're looking at here is a computer is the brain of the operation. In this case, or in the case of the cart that I use, it's a MacBook Pro. It can be a PC, it can be an iMac. Then you have your Ultra Studio for your Resolve Live. You have your color control panels for color grading. You have an eGPU. You can use one of ours. There are many third-party GPUs that you can use that are Thunderbolt 3. Then you have some storage. We use the G Shuttle XL drives. They're really nice. It allows you. They're Thunderbolt 3. It allows you to copy quite fast. I think we get about 1200 read write on these. They're they're spinning, but they also have like ports for or slide in card readers, so you can actually put the cards on board, like red cards or CFast cards. Just pop in there on a slot, so they're on the same bus. So that actually speeds up your copying. Basically, a full red card or a full CFast 2.0 card, the five like the 520s or 512s copy off in about 9 minutes, and then uh, the 960s it's about 17 minutes to offload, which you really want to not you don't want to have a bottleneck here, because that will slow down your delivery process. There is a network switch. The network switch, sorry, the network switch is controlling all your Ethernets, so that anything that has its own software, like the audio monitor, the scopes, the ATEM switcher, and the hyperdecks, can all be controlled from the laptop through their control software. And also the ATEM software has control for hyperdecks, and you can control up to 4. And basically in the ATEM software, it shows you like how many clips you have. It lists every clip per recorder. So if you need to play something back immediately, it's just a click of the button and play back. So that's why you want this all on its own Ethernet or network switch. The other thing is how the card is powered. We have a Furman power conditioner, and then we have some backup power. On the backup power is where you're going to keep your critical devices, like the hard drives, your eGPU, and the computer on the critical power, because if you have to move, which happens all day long when you're on set, so when you move, you can keep your copies going, your dailies rendering as you're moving around. This gives you about a half hour of backup battery before you need to plug in. So it's plenty of time to keep copies going or rendering going while you move to the next location, or when you're wrapping up at the end of the day before you load up. The next thing you have is the power conditioner that's feeding some power to the Ultra Studio and some of these other ones that require IEC cables. But there's these network switches that are on the cart are also PoE, and a lot of our devices that we make here at Blackmagic Design can be powered over PoE. So that allows us to get rid of those thick IEC cables out of the cart and actually power a whole bunch of devices. And in this setup, we're powering about 14 devices over PoE, which allows you to make the footprint of the cart smaller and put it all in its own self-contained roto rack case. In addition to those other devices, we've added streaming to the cart. This is a request from production since COVID, and since on set things are broken up into zones, and not everybody can be near a video village. We use a web presenter and a local LAN connection. So we set up a wireless LAN. You could stream it over the internet if you didn't have security concerns, although a lot of the features that we work on do have security concerns. So we make it a closed network, and we can stream the live camera feed to anybody's iPhone, iPad, computer, laptop. That just gets the traditional village and people standing around each other during a pandemic, keeping people separated. It's probably a good idea on set, since a lot of times you're crammed in small locations. So the streaming ability allows people to spread out on set and be able to work without worrying about that. Here's some pictures of the cart, and as you can see, because these components can fit into a rack case, so that's all the gear right here in the left picture. You can actually put it on a smaller cart, which is the one on the right there, the far right. We use that like on an indie feature. So you can really shrink the footprint of the cart down to depending on what the scale of the production is. Got a few options there. And this is just the workflow itself, how we are how this all works. So basically, the cameras are shooting. We're recording the live feed from the wireless Teradecks, but obviously the raw media is being captured on cards on the onboard camera. So, and then the audio feed is coming into the card so that we can immediately hear what the production audio is. There's the audio mixers will also give out headsets to, production people who are in Video Village to listen to it, but we're also recording that. So we're getting a feed from the on-set audio mixer. So that's being recorded with the camera feed live to the recorders. That is not obviously not being recorded onto the cards. The cards are video, the production sound mixer is sound. So we record what's live, we play back and review as needed. The playback is the color corrected, so it's either being LUTed in the monitors on set or LUTed in the camera, depending on what cameras you're using. Then we are doing the syncing and prepping of Dailies timelines. So once we get those cards, once we do a break, we offload the cards to local storage. And depending on also the scale of the show, you can have as much as 250 terabytes of storage on the cart, which I had on the last show. You can scale that down to 20 terabytes. It really just depends on how much you think you're going to be processing and what you're shooting and what the file size is that the camera is putting out. The last show we did was 8K, so we needed a pretty beefy storage for processing of dailies and also storing of dailies. So you basically have a working copy of the movie on the cart at all times. So if somebody wants to play back from a specific day of dailies, you can call up any day other than the day you're on and play back something from dailies. If you're doing some practical visual effects, you can use Resolve Live and capture a plate. You can superimpose it over the live signal, and you can place your practical visual effects in the scene. So we did that a lot on the indie horror feature that we worked on. So you're prepping the timelines here, you're rendering them out, you're uploading, depending on what the workflow is for, whether you're using Pix or Frame.io. I'll talk about that in a little bit. You're uploading here from set, so that information is going up to the cloud, and then you're prepping a drive that's going to editorial that has all the raw camera files, any particular renders you need to have done, and the sound are all going to editorial. With a DRT or a DRB or a project, however you guys would like to work. Davinci Resolve 17 allows you to have DRTs and DRBs now, so it's a little bit easier to collaborate from one location that might be like the set is kind of an island. You're on your own system, so if you want to send like a bin with media and a timeline, you can send that to editorial where they can load the bin and link the media. You can send a timeline and with the media that they can recall, and then any LUTs you need. And so that's what this is showing right here, where everything's going. And then let's talk about, before I move on, are there any other questions before I move into Resolve and actually show you how this is working?
So far, so good. We have had a question about whether you color grade live footage as you're sitting on the cart.
That depends on the production. I would say that I've seen, obviously I've seen it both ways. There are some that want to do, DPs want to do some creative color correction on set. We would save that as a LUT and apply it to the scene. There are others that just want to use one LUT for the whole show. And then there are others that have a LUT for every scene, or a LUT for a specific look, like nighttime interior, nighttime exterior, daytime interior, daytime exterior. So maybe you have like 4 or 5 LUTs for the whole show, and then maybe some secondary LUTs that you would use on like some 709 footage, or like GoPros or drones, or because some drones can shoot raw, some drones cannot shoot raw. So it really just depends on like what the actual workflow on set is. But I've seen, obviously we have the ability on the cart to do Resolve Live, so we can live grade the feed from the camera. And create a LUT that we can use for that entire scene. Whether they want to utilize that or not is a different story. Sometimes they want to, sometimes they don't. So I'm just gonna stop sharing this, and I'm gonna go over to my Davinci Resolve project.
In the meantime, now, I don't know if this is like a bit personal, but we've got an attendee asking whether you're a member of the IA 600 or the 695.
Yes, I am 700 and the camera department. So you do need to be, well, you don't need to be, but in certain states, you do need to be in the union. Obviously, if you're working in Atlanta, if you're working in a right to work state, obviously you don't need to be in the union to do this. But if you're working in Los Angeles or New York, or I mean, it's helpful to be in the union in Atlanta too when you're working there, but it just depends. But yes, I'm a member of the unions.
And we've also got one from Richard asking, with Resolve Live, can you record and resolve at the same time as creating a backup?
You can't record. You can grab stills. So there's 2 things you can do. You can freeze the image. So you can freeze the live image and live grade the frozen image, and then you can release that. There's 2 little icons. I'll show it to you in a minute. There's 2 little icons that freeze, or there's a little camera picture that you can grab stills as you as the shot's going on, and you can save those stills in the timeline and grade them later. You don't have to grade them right that second. I usually just freeze the image and grade on top of that and grab stills of that, and then you can save those stills as, those are color corrections, just like when you're working on the color page, and then you can copy those to any shot. So one thing a lot of people don't know that's here in Resolve is there is a clone tool. So if you click on the clone tool, I'll just make it a little bigger here so everyone can see.
Well, since we're talking about cloning, we have a question. Would you normally back up all the raw materials to a SAN server or keep them on separate external HDs?
Let me get to that in a minute.
Okay, very good, very good.
So basically, I have some tests. I made a little test cards here. So let's say the camera breaks. You've got A001 is your card. The clone tool allows you to copy and do your checksums. So you have your checksum types here, and you can, preserve the folder naming and all that stuff here. But you can add a job and have multiple destinations. For instance, I can grab this A01 and put that as my source, but I can have multiple destinations. So I can uh, uh, I can prep a drive at the same time as I'm, copying to my local storage. That's on the cart. So maybe you want to prep a drive for editorial at the same time. In this case, I'm going to just drop it in this dailies folder. And then you can have multiple jobs here. You can make this into a queue. And then basically all you need to do is hit the clone. And there you go. This was a small folder. So it is actually made a copy, and it's also done the checksum. You can use this method. It requires you to do a little bit more making of reports on your own, which I did on the first job. I use specifically the clone tool. There are also third-party applications like Shotput Pro, Palmfort, SilverStack, that can also be used in your copying process. It doesn't have to be done in Resolve. Those generate some really nice fancy reports that productions are used to seeing. If you want some really nice PDF reports, or you want them to email, I would suggest using something like that versus using the clone tool. The clone tool is really great because it's right here integrated in Resolve, and you can do everything right here. Although if you need something that's more, more robust in the fact of, generating reports and number of clips and all that stuff, you're going to want to use like Shotput Pro or Palmfort or SilverStack, they're really great applications for doing that kind of stuff. It keeps track of like, the number of clips, how much media has been copied. It'll give you thumbnails of the actual clips. So and I use that. I use Shotput Pro a lot. And then you can also, so let's do this. Let's add another job because that's completed, and we'll do the sound roll. Same place. And we'll clone that. And so if we look in this dailies folder now, we have some media here. We have, should show us. Yeah, so we have sound and picture here in our, and then if you actually go look at this on the root level, you'll see in this folder there's also some MHL files here, and then some text files in here, which are your checksums. You probably can't. Hold on a second. Let me show you that. Second. So in the Finder window, you can see here, you've got some audio files, you've got some sound, you've got some MHL files, and you've got your MD5 checksums. So you can do all that. Also in Palmfort, you can do the checksums, tag ones. So those are good too. Stop sharing. Share my Resolve screen. Okay, so now that we've got some cloned information here, we've got some cards that we've offloaded. Now we want to do some syncing. So that's the clone tool. Does anybody have any questions about what I just did with the clone tool and copying media and how we get it to multiple locations?
So now everyone's got a bit of a discussion going about the different applications they use. We've had a request. What were the names again for creating the PDF or email reports?
So there's a bunch of them. There's Shot Put Pro, Pomfort. There's another one called Silver Stack. They, when you are, when you're when you're doing your copy, it'll generate the checksum, but it'll also generate a report of all the clips that were copied from the card. And so it'll tell you, like, let me see if I have an example file here. Hold on one sec. Let's see. Stand by. Yes. One second. Just opening one of the reports up so that they can see what it looks like. Okay, stop my share and I'll share the screen so you can see what it looks like. So this is an example of a report that would be generated. So up here you see it tells you, you know, what the checksum verification type was, the size of the offload, when it was offloaded, how many files, uh, the time it took to offload this card, which was 5 minutes and 37 seconds. And then it shows you all the clips. You can choose to have this in like a thumbnail view, like I have here. It tells you the file path where it was copied to. Right down here at the bottom, it's telling you when, you know, how much was copied and if it was successful. Obviously, if it fails, it's going to tell you that it failed. It will do that in Resolve as well. If the copy fails, it will tell you that it failed. It won't necessarily tell you what it failed on, and same with any of these applications. It's not going to tell you which file it failed on, although you can do like Pomfort, I think, allows you to do like pickups. So like if it fails in the middle of the card, you can pick it up from where it left off. So you're not recopying the whole card again. And then these reports can be, when they're generated, they get emailed. And within a Pomfort, or within the, you know, software, there's, you know, I'm not going to get into that because it's not really, you know, Davinci Resolve stuff, but like there's a way to set up, you know, who you want it to email and stuff like that. And then you can generate these reports. I usually just save them, and then I'll also send them out at the end of the night, like all the reports from all the cards all at one time to whomever needs it. Is that causing more questions, or?
So I believe in reference to the slide you just shared, somebody was interested in what the source only meant. There's like a source only bracket next to checksum type.
Yeah, so you can do different kinds of copies. It's talking about what the copy is.
But no, otherwise we're all good, and Tony's doing a lot of heavy lifting with answering people's questions and also sharing his own experiences.
Let me stop the share and let me share my Davinci Resolve. There we go. Okay, so now that we have some media, we've got some camera raw, we got some sound, we're gonna just take all this and we're going to drag it down into a dailies bin. So I created a bin here called Dailies Day 1. You need to have your sound and your picture all in one bin for syncing. So if they can't be in separate bins. So if you select everything here and you right click and you say auto sync, you have a few options here. You have based on time code and append tracks, based on the waveform, and based on a waveform and append tracks. So appending tracks means you will add your audio with the whatever audio was the scratch audio from the camera. Because sometimes they also are recording on the camera. That can be helpful if the editor wants to, is looking for a sync point and he can't necessarily find it and he wants to listen to what was recorded on the camera, but they're not always recording on the camera, so I wouldn't rely on that 100%. That's just if you don't want to blow over what's on the, what's there. I usually do based on time code. And so once you have done that, you now have a clip that has sunk audio. We'll play that clip.
Or better, because vegan food is kind of coming to a new level. It's starting to get the recognition that it deserves.
So now in a true daily, if I was syncing this with smart slates and stuff like that, like in true fashion, I would actually go through and check each. So once I did the auto sync, I would go through each individual take and just check the sticks on each one. The way to do that is you would find your clap or your sync point. You can unlink the, you can just jog through it and step through or reverse and listen for your clap. If it's off, you can unlink the sound, and then you can, with that in focus right here, you can adjust the audio track. If you click on the viewer with the, with the picture, you can adjust just the picture, and then you can relink the file. So if it's tail sticks and it's off by a few frames, or you can use the waveform by linking and unlinking the clip. And then, so I would go through the entire, once I've done the auto sync, I would check each individual take and make sure that that they're in sync at the sticks. As you can see, it's pretty good. So as long as the sound mixer has, jam sync the cameras and the smart slates are good, then it's, based on time code, it's going to work really well. It's 99.9% going to get you where you're going to be. Most of your sticks are going to be, right on the money. But you're going to have to do some adjusting depending on the sticks. And you can also do this traditionally too, because as you see, you have some time code here. You have time code for your picture, time code for your sound. So if you wanted to go to the sticks and read the time code there, and then adjust your sound to the correct matching time code. So like here, this says 5506 up here in the corner. If I go to 5506 and then I relink the image, it's going to be in sync. So there's a way to double check and make sure that your sync is on for all your clips when you're doing dailies, and you're going to want to do that once you do your auto sync. Are there any questions about syncing dailies?
None so far.
Okay. So once you've got some dailies sunk, you can then create a timeline. So I'll just do that. I'll just create a new timeline using selected clips. We can call this day 1 dailies. So now you have a dailies timeline. Look at it. So you've got your audio associated with your clips. And now there's a few ways of applying color to this. What we tend to do, since we're using an all resolve workflow, I like to associate my LUT or my color correction here in the media pool. So obviously, if you right click and you say LUT, you can put your, associate your LUTs here for your grade. You can create grades and export them to a LUTs folder, and then you can apply them. You can call it day one and apply a LUT to this. That way, if it's applied in the media pool, when editorial gets these files and they drag a file to do an assembly, they're always grabbing the current color because it's been associated to that clip. And then that way, that ensures that they're looking at the color from set from beginning to end all the way through until we change the look of the show. So let's say they've assembled they've got their lock cut for a director's preview or for final. We can then associate new colors, new color corrections to the entire show at that point. But what we want to make sure is that it's consistent from set all the way until we get to that point of doing a final pass. So every time, if you associate it to the clip in the media pool, anytime they grab that clip and build a timeline with that clip, it will always have the correct color associated to it. And of course, you can create a grade here on the color page, or maybe you have a still from that you've taken while you were in Resolve Live, and you can adjust the color here. I'll make an adjustment, warmer, and then you can right click and say generate LUT, and you have a couple of LUTs that you can export here. You can point it to a particular folder. You can name it, whatever it is, scene whatever, and the day of dailies it is, day one scene and the date. And then that way we know where that LUT came from, and you can organize your LUTs folder however you want. It's actually something new here in Davinci Resolve 2. I believe it's, where is it? Master settings or color management. You can tell it where you want your LUT folder to be. Daria, where would I find that again now?
That would be in the preferences.
Oh,
So
in preferences. Preferences.
in general
General.
and right at the bottom.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what yeah.
So right here in general preferences, you can actually now create a LUT directory where you want your LUTs to be saved. And that can be any location you want now. But before it was just defaulted to the LUTs folder, and then it was a little bit hard to navigate to where the LUTs were being saved. But now you can, create a location wherever you like and put your LUTs there. That's grading and creating LUTs. You can grab stills, obviously, and apply them to your color corrections. Now you have a dailies timeline created with all your color correction and all your sunk takes. So the next thing that needs to happen is we need to get this to editorial. It used to be in Resolve 16 that you could only get this project over by creating a DRP and sending it over to editorial with the media. What's great about Davinci Resolve 17 is that it allows you to do a couple things. If you right click on your bin, you'll see something that says export bin, and this will create a DRB, a Davinci Resolve bin, and it will have the media and if you have media in there, you can put media in there, you can put timelines in that bin, and then you can send timelines and media within the bin to editorial with the media. So that's the bin. And then if you right click your timeline and you say export, you have a Davinci Resolve timeline is the default. So this will export your timeline, and then they can copy the media wherever they need to on a centralized storage editorial when they get the drive, and then they can just import this timeline into the working project and link to the media. So then they have sunk takes. This is a really great way of exchanging information, timelines and bins back and forth between set, because set's an island, and also editorial might be working in a collaborative project. So that gets the media into the collaborative project. What we ended up using bins versus timelines on set. I'll just let me open a current. I'm going to save this really quickly so I can show you, and it'll lead me into the next thing I want to show you guys. So I'm just going to open up a project from the movie I just did so you guys can see. So here's some bins here, and what we did is editorial requested that we create a bin for all the takes that were false starts within in the dailies. So anything that didn't really have sunk sound to, or there were false starts on, I would create a bin with that media in it, and then I would export that bin. So they would get, a dailies bin, they would get, the false starts bin, and the media and a sound bin, with all the sound files, and then they would have something. So maybe they have a take, and they have some, they're always rolling. So they just have extra clips that were just the no rolls associated. Maybe they want to pull from that footage, or they want to capture something from it. So it's a good way to export a bin and keep it separate from what your dailies timeline is. So you can see here, I organize it by when I'm doing a job, I have a timelines bin, I have a dailies bin, I have so this is the sunk takes. Then I have a false starts bin for all the takes that were false starts, and then at the end I copy the sound into its own bin after I've already sunk it together, which you can do. So once you've sunk it together, you can move the audio out of the bin if you want to make it cleaner. So I just cleaned it up so that they have a separate sound folder with the sound in it. What's interesting to take a look at here is there's some metadata here that isn't normally here when you process the dailies. Before I move on, are there any questions about syncing, color, exporting your bins, your timelines, before I start talking about some metadata stuff?
Yes, Richard mentioned that in version 17, Blackmagic added support for growing files in the media pool. What does that mean?
Growing files. That's a good question.
It is.
I will have to look into that, but that really doesn't, I don't think that really pertains to like anything that I've come across in dailies. Daria?
Yes, sorry, I'm looking into it as well, because off the top of my head, I couldn't recall. I thought maybe you had known.
Yeah. No, I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure what the growing files it's referring to.
Yeah, if you give me a couple of minutes, I'll get back to him directly. Oh, got Tony once again helping us out. Growing files is for live source ingesting while editing, so used for news outlets.
Yeah. So I don't really come across like the files changing size while we're doing this process. Basically, you've got what's coming in live. You've got what's being recorded live to the cart over wireless, and then you've got the actual media that's on the card that you're offloading. So the file size isn't really changing while you're doing this process. Okay, so you'll see here that when you bring a if you look at just this file name column here, this column is like basically mirrors the clip name column when you bring these files in originally. In the other project, I'll bring in a clip right here so you guys can see. So if I bring all these clips in, you see that it says clip name, file name. It has no other information in the column. So one thing that happens when you sync a take automatically in Resolve, it will populate the scene and take information into the scene and take column. Now you will have a relationship between a clip name or a file name and a scene and take. So what's great about Resolve is if you come up here to help and go to documentation and look in this developer folder, I'll share that. Hold on one sec. If you look in this developer folder, there's a folder called scripting, and there's some examples, there's some modules, and then there's a README text file. So this is basically giving you the language for the Open API, and it allows you to do some scripting within Davinci Resolve, and you can create your own scripts. So basically, we have a script that looks at the script supervisor's CSV files that she creates, her notes, and we actually inject that metadata into every file. So for instance, we've got a file name, we've got a scene and take associated with it, and you can see the comments and description columns here have all the information that the script supervisor added from her notes, and that gets ingested here. This is really helpful because anytime we're cutting now in Resolve, this is just like color correction. This is following the clips wherever they go. So if they're assembling a scene and they want to see what the director or the cinematographer thought about that take, and whether it was a good take, or any information, including like focal lengths. Sometimes the script supervisor will put like what filters are being used, what focal lengths are being used, what the eye lines were, all that kind of information. It'll be attached to the clip's metadata. So that follows that clip wherever it goes. In addition, sometimes we are using editors who are used to other platforms, and they like to have their clip name reformatted to match what the scene, take, and camera role is. So we've actually told this script to also, not only does it inject some metadata, but it also reformats the clip name column to match, what scene it is, the take, and the camera. And if it is a circle take, it'll have an asterisk by it, so that just by looking at the column or the clip name column, if they sort by this in the main project, in the editorial project, they're going to see all the scene and take information just like this here in the clip name. So you can do some creative things with the Open API.
Hey, Michael?
Yes?
What kind of script supervisor software are you used to working with?
All kinds, because they use all kinds of software. So some people just use FileMaker. Some people use Scripty, and there's another one besides Scripty. I can't remember the name, but they all can export PDFs, text files, and CSV files. And we use the CSV file. Obviously, you're going to have to adapt your script based on who you're working with as a script supervisor, because they all work differently and they all format their notes differently. But this is something that is another layer of metadata that you can have here in Resolve just by using some scripting. And it's very helpful to have this information as part of the tape. Does that answer the question?
Yep. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
And in fact, we're getting quite a lot of questions about this process. For example, how do you ingest these notes? Do you type them in yourself?
No, this is via a Python script. So I just run a script. We've created like a little droplet where it says, you know, load CSV file, and then load ALE, and then it'll parse the information. It'll parse the information, and then it will inject it. You just have to have your bin open in Resolve, and once you run the script, it'll just inject this metadata in here. I don't type this in at all. It would take me way too long and I wouldn't get my dailies done every day if I had to type all this information in here. So basically, all we do is we write a script for this, and it does it automatically. And it's something that anybody can do who is who's pretty good at doing Python scripts. I have a guy that does it for me, but you know, it basically in that developer folder, it teaches you how to do it. So. Yeah, so this isn't being I'm not typing any of this stuff. It's the script takes care of that for me every day.
At what point do you run that?
I usually, depending on how many breaks you're doing a day, I'll have it's not a big deal for the script supervisor to just export a CSV of what they have so far. They don't have to do any extra work to do that. It's just like it's an export function. So if we're breaking midday, I just have them send me a CSV of what they already have. And then I also get one at the end of the day. So I'll get, you know, the full report at the end of the day that she does or he or she does. That'll be, you know, a CSV, PDF files. They usually send that to production anyway. I'm just on the email chain when those go out so that I can grab that CSV file. It's really good that if you're doing this workflow on set to do a couple of things before you actually start, and that is contact the script supervisor, contact the sound mixer, find out like what kind of media they're recording to, how they generate their reports, because sound mixers and script supervisors have a set of reports that they have to deliver to. So I usually ask for their contact information. I try to get a sample of the script supervisor's work before day one. So if there's any modifications that we need to make to the script, we can make that based off of how they generate their reports, so that I'm not doing this on day one. You know, obviously there's some growing pains on every job the first week of the job, with any dailies job there is. So, you know, and, you know, you have to fine tune right at the beginning. And then once you've got a rhythm going, then this stuff is pretty automatic. So I like to contact the script supervisor and the people that I'm going to be interacting with ahead of time, so that I can just get an idea of what, you know, information they're putting in their reports and what I'm going to need to extract from their CSV file. Okay, so we've gone over coloring dailies, syncing dailies, adding metadata to your clips, exporting things for editorial, how to copy and prep drives, and what editorial is doing. Let's talk about another layer of collaboration. So obviously, once you have all this information completed and you're now ready to render your dailies timeline, So depending on the studio you're working with, you might be delivering something to Pix. So let's go to the delivery tab here first. Well, actually, let me show you one thing here. Obviously, you might have separate burn-in information that you need to do for dailies. You can set presets for that. If we go to workspace and we go to data burn-in, you can see that I have in the 3-dot menu here, I have a whole bunch of presets set up here. So for VFX turnovers or for dailies, but let's load the Disney one. If we load that, it's going to turn on a bunch of windows here. And I'm just going to uncheck prefix. So you've got, audio time code, record time code. This can be customized. So obviously you can, have a lower third burn in. You can have, this is probably going to change depending on like what the spec sheet for the dailies are. But basically once you create your windows how you want them, you can save them as a preset. And then you can also update any of these. You can load a preset, you can update a preset, and you can delete a preset. That's all from the 3-dot menu in the data burn-in pop-up menu, and that's found under workspace data burn-ins. You can also save your layout preset, like how your columns are and how your pages are laid out here. And you can actually export a layout and import a layout. So if you're working on different machines, you can create a layout and how your pages are laid out. You can save those, update them, export them, delete them. That's also under workspace. But once you create a data burn-in preset, it's available to you under the deliver page tab. So a few things here. So I'm just going to scroll over here. Under this tab here, you can see I have a whole bunch of different presets set up for rendering. So let's say I'm going to do, for Pix, it's got all the Pix requirements set up here. And if you go under advanced settings and you scroll down here, you can see I have a data burn-in associated to it. I can click this and select any of those data burn-ins that I created here or in the data burn-in menu. I have all of them available to me here. So you can associate that to a render preset. And then you can save these as presets here in Resolve. And here are all my presets, and they have the burn-in windows associated to them. Hold on one second here. I'm gonna just stop sharing for a minute here. So I'm gonna show you something else. Are there any questions while I'm looking for this really quickly? Yeah, it's just covered. Hold on one second. So let me share my screen again. I can show you where you are. Just want to move my window that's in the way here.
But yeah, we don't really have questions at the moment.
Okay.
Some discussions going on, some feature requests.
So here in the 3-dot menu is where you would save your preset. And what's really also great about DaVinci Resolve that people don't know about is this one in particular, which is called Create Additional Video Output. If I click on that right now, I now have an additional output that I can make simultaneously at the same time. And you can have as many of these as you want. Obviously, it's going to slow down when you do your render. But let's say you're making more than one deliverable with more than one burn-in. You can create additional outputs. And what that means is it's not going to, you know, like if you do a traditional render queue where you set a different, you know, deliverable here in the queue, it's going to go back to the beginning of the timeline every time and start over from the beginning. If you created an additional video output, it's only going to go through the timeline once, but it's going to create whatever deliverables you are asking it to do simultaneously. So this will slow down the speed of your render, but it's actually creating more than one output at a time. So maybe you're doing some DNX renders and some quick times. You can do those at the same time. Or maybe you have different data burn-ins for different producers, or whoever is looking at dailies, they need their own watermark on them of some sort. So you can create a different data burn-in associated with an output, and then you can create additional outputs and have them all render at the same time in your in one timeline. So that's super useful for anybody who has multiple deliverables to do at a time, and you don't want to build a whole render queue for each one. And that's in the 3-dot menu, create additional video output. Any questions about rendering your timelines? And this is going to change depending on, like, if you're uploading to PIX, you might be making H.264s. If you're delivering some, you know, DNX media, you're gonna make your DNX media for editorial if that's needed. In this workflow, we're delivering the raw media, so they're actually cutting raw in the timeline. So all they need is a DRT from the project. Any questions about that?
No, so far pretty quiet here.
Okay, so I want to talk about one other thing, and that's another layer of collaboration that's involved in this, and that is Frame.io. So when you render a timeline in DaVinci Resolve, you can select quick export, and when you export something, you have this Frame.io option. So if you export this timeline using this Frame.io option, you can put it in a particular folder, and I've delivered dailies this way before. So, and once you export those dailies, they start pinging everybody who's part of the Frame.io project, and then they can comment directly on those dailies clips, and that stuff will come directly back to your timeline as markers. First, before I do that, let me just show you under DaVinci Preferences, you have internet accounts, and this is where you would enter your Frame.io account right here. And once you do that, if you look in the media pool, you'll have a little folder here that says Frame.io, and then you can see whatever projects you have going on in Frame.io. Now I've exported some test files, and I'll just import them into the media pool really quickly so we can look at them. So let's give it a second here to sync these clips. So you see as it syncs the clip, a little caret pops up next to the file. Let's let that, yeah. Okay, so now these little carets actually, if you click them, they're showing that there are some markers associated with these clips. So these were added in Frame.io, and if I click on them, it's going to tell me, you know, the note. It's going to show me what that note is. It actually shows up here in the actual clip length in the GUI monitor. So we can actually click on that one. We can see what it is. Also, annotations also come over this way too. So you can see the annotations and the notes. Can we put a vignette on this? You know, any arrows that they've drawn in Frame.io will come across any of those annotations. And it also puts that comment here in the comments clip when you import that clip back in from Frame.io. If you render an entire timeline to Frame.io, these markers will actually go right into your Davinci Resolve timeline. So if we render the dailies right from this timeline and people start commenting on this, then you'll see little markers show up here in the dailies timeline with notes associated to the timeline. And to make that happen, so to let those markers pop up in your timeline, you would just go to the file menu and hit quick export again and click on the Frame.io button and then browse the destination where you want it to go. You can make a file name, you can upload it to a specific folder to the day, and then you export your entire timeline as it is right there to Frame.io. And then now any notes that people comment, it'll go right back into your timeline. So that's just another layer of collaboration. Frame.io is really cool for doing dailies. Pix works really well. Pix just has extra steps. You might not necessarily want to be doing your Pix uploads on set. A lot of times the AE on the show will want to review the clips that are going up for review to make sure that, one, it's been signed off by the director, that the executives can see those takes, and making sure that circled takes are the only thing that I've seen up on Pix. So a lot of times you'll send the rendered H.264 media for Pix, and then the assistant editor will QC that information to make sure to check and make sure that those takes are approved to go up on Pix. If you're using Frame.io, you can actually do it right from set. You don't need the greatest internet connection to make it work. What ends up happening is the director, the DP, who are actually still shooting the scene, are watching dailies at the same time too, because dailies are coming through as you're rendering them from your time. So basically they're getting pings on their phone or on their iPad or their laptop. And a lot of times when we're using the Frame.io workflow, dailies have already been reviewed by lunchtime, like from director or DP. So that's great too, because if you're if you're still shooting, you're in the middle of shooting a particular scene, everybody can discuss what's going on. They're seeing the dailies, they know what they're missing, they know what they need to get. The editor can also be included on that Frame.io chain, so that way they can give their feedback while you're still in the shooting the scenes. So if there's something we're not getting that they need for cutting, they can give us that feedback almost immediately. We get that feedback, when we're not using Frame.io. It just is a little bit more delayed, like, because the editor's not seeing something for maybe the first 6 hours of shooting during the day, and then they can give your feedback, and we haven't moved on yet on, we haven't wrapped for the day on set. But this is just another way, if you can use Frame.io, an advantage of using it. Any questions?
So Richard's asking, does Resolve work with C2C?
C2C. Oh, no, I don't believe it does. So that's pretty much the workflow from beginning to end. from the cart. I'm going to, yeah, we talked about all this. Cool. I'm going to open it up for more Q&A right now. If there are any questions that we haven't answered.
Yeah, I think we're looking pretty good. There was a bit of a discussion going on about whether it's possible to check off frame IO comments left by others when doing the updates.
Yeah, you can delete the comments from the timeline. So if it pops up, you can just delete it from you can delete markers because it'll come in as a marker, and if you delete it, you know, you've addressed it. You can also respond via frame IO as well, which I will do sometimes. I'll just respond in there.
In this case, in this case, would it be possible to review the chain of communication between you and other departments?
Yeah, anytime they comment, it comes back into the timeline. So you might have a whole bunch of comments associated to the clip. It's a good idea to like organize, like it's good if they're, you know, organized by color coding or something, so that you otherwise it gets a little bit confusing with all the different notes coming in. But yes.
Also, would you be?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Would you be able to recap how you imported the CSV file?
Oh yeah. So basically, we have a script, a Python script that is running in a terminal shell outside of Resolve, and the way it works is you leave the bin open with your project running, and then you execute that Python script, and it injects the media into Resolve. It'll automatically populate all those columns. So that's something that you can, you know, have written. You can use that by utilizing Resolve's Open API, and there are instructions on how to do that in the developer tab. Anything else?
Here's a more general question. What monitors do DITs use?
That is a good question. A lot of DITs use, well, what's used on set a lot are the Flanders DM240s and DM250s. They're great monitors because you can, you know, have up to like 16 LUTs in there if you need that. You can you can do a bunch of, you know, it has scopes on those monitors, so a lot of people end up using Flanders monitors. That's not the only monitors out there. Those are usually rented by the production as well. So I try to have the same kind of monitor that they're going to give to Village and everybody else. I do have a bunch of Blackmagic monitors that I bring on set that a lot of people like those Smart View monitors. They're kind of small, so I use them for like hair and makeup and stuff like that. But we used a lot less of those this time around on the last job, on the job I just came off of, because of COVID, and we did more streaming. So we had a lot of people like, you know, streaming it to their iPad or iPhone and looking at it on their tablets or their phones versus a monitor. Obviously, the DP is going to want to have a monitor on set. I mean, I've been on movies where we've had Sony X300s, and it becomes really stressful when that thing's on your cart. So I don't recommend it, but some productions have it. Resolve Live. People are asking about that. Let me just show you. See if I can. I don't have a live camera signal up to this, but I'm just gonna open up a Resolve Live timeline I have. I'll share my screen. Hold on. I'm opening up a Resolve Live timeline. Hold on. And then share, and let me share. Let's see if this works so you can get an idea. One thing you do have to have in the time is a timeline in order for this to work. Nah, it's not going to work because I don't have a live signal fed into my computer at the moment. In any case, when first you want to create your timeline, and it's Command R is the function to turn Resolve Live on. So Command R, or you can come here under Color, Resolve Live, and turn it on. This when you're getting the live signal, this will turn red. The other thing that's not in line here, you have to have an Ultra Studio for this to work. So, or some kind of capture card. So like a deck link. So for instance, the signal, when I'm using this laptop, the signal from the Ultra Studio is getting a feed, the live feed via the switcher that I showed you guys. And then that is feeding the laptop via Thunderbolt 3. And then when you enter the Resolve Live mode, then this will turn red and you'll see the signal show up here, and you'll have like a little picture of a snowflake and a little picture of a camera. And the camera is for grabbing stills, and the snowflake will freeze the image. And also if you come under color and you look under Resolve Live, you have some hotkeys for freeze and snapshot here. So you can use those as well. But I just use the little icons that pop up in the GUI window right here where these play record buttons are. It'll just say, it'll have a little snowflake picture and a little camera picture. So you just click the camera picture and you'll see stills just popping up in here. And also you'll see little snapshots populate your timeline right here as well. And then that way, you can grade those stills later. If you hit the little snowflake button, then you can actually grade the frozen image right here as you're going. And then you can grab a still of anything that's in there by right-clicking and hitting grab still. Or if you have a control surface, just grab the still. And so then you're grabbing a still of what you got. But anything that gets generated in the timeline can be created as a LUT. So you can export them as LUTs. You can also export your stills and add them to you can add them to the stuff that, you can add them to the raw media out of the camera. So you can add those grades later when you're doing your dailies timeline, and then you can create LUTs for them as well. So it's pretty awesome. It's really great for, it doesn't get used all the time on set, the live grading. I would say, maybe when you're setting up the scene at the beginning of the day, they might want to come over and do a live grade real quick of the scene and get a look for it. If they're not just using like one LUT. Like I said, it depends on the show, really. Some shows have one LUT for the whole show and that's it. They don't want to generate, specific LUTs. I had a show that had 39 LUTs on it, so it just depends. That's Resolve Live.
Would you be able to touch on remote workflows like uploading to an FTP?
There are many ways to do remote workflows. We actually talk about this in the collaboration. But are you talking about? Are they talking about FTPs like for just sending media?
I guess maybe it's a broader question. So Dean is asking, can you touch on remote workflows, like for example, starting with the FTP upload, etc. Or is that too broad for this topic that we're doing today?
I think the way we so what we're usually doing when we're uploading, so we're usually uploading dailies in this workflow, like to Frame.io or to Pix. The only other when we're doing uploads, like, so what ends up happening, like if we're shooting in Atlanta and let's say it's a Disney film and we need to get the media back to Los Angeles, for Dailies review, it's happening via Pix. For the marketing department, we're sending the media from near set editorial via Aspera back to Burbank, where the marketing department can pull it down. We are also uploading. We're backing up the raw media to LTO. Depending on the studio, that could be a requirement. So editorial is usually backing up to LTOs, and the LTOs are shipped back to Burbank. But that's really how we're utilizing, sending media around. It's either being uploaded from set, being uploaded from editorial, or shipped back via LTO. So we use like Aspera. We use you could use an FTP folder. We've used Dropbox before. I mean, it depends on the production.
Have you used the ATEM Mini Pro and the Streaming Bridge for remote viewing or grading sessions?
No, we used for remote grading sessions. We use Streambox and other products like that, because you want to have the highest quality signal when you're doing like a remote grading session. You don't want to be grading off a compressed image that isn't and also you want to be able to control the way it looks on either side. So usually if I'm doing like a Streambox color correction session, I make sure that the other end has like a broadcast quality monitor and it's set up properly for doing remote grading. I think that's a little off topic from the cart.
Yes, we're reaching the stage where a lot of the questions are starting to get a bit off topic.
Yeah. So I think if there's any questions that I haven't covered as far as the cart goes and the cart workflow that you just saw, you can hit us at workflow@blackmagicdesign.com. Otherwise, I think that does it for this session. I want to thank Ramon and Daria for joining me on the Q&A and during this session and for all their help. And we'll see you next time.